Hello there YouTube, this is now Bob and Fozzie. This is going to be end user's review and opinion of the Xigmatek Frontliner ATX case. So this case comes with 3 fans by default, 1, 2, and 1 at the back for exhaust. It's got a magnetic filter up top. There is another filter at the bottom for the power supply, right over here, and also a mesh that's actually beneath the fan. This is an acrylic panel, Xigmatek logo over here, and there are breathing holes this side and this side. Left panel's full acrylic, just like you saw at the beginning, and the right side is a standard steel cover. So, things to note: this part is extremely flimsy, and the finishing is not very good. These are all cheap materials. The thumb screws are actually very good, and they come off really easily. So just unscrew this. This is what a finished build looks like. It looks pretty clean, as you can see, save for some cables that weren't really managed properly. Sorry for the quality. So you can see our I/O headers are cutouts in all of the correct places, as well as a lot of cable tie-down points. So, hold on. In terms of drive support, it supports 2 2.5-inch drives, 2 3.5-inch drives, and 2 5.25-inch drives that go through here. Now, I'm using 6 drives for storage. So what I've basically done is aligned the SSDs to the case where the mount points for the 5.25-inch drives are. I just screwed them in whilst holding it from the other side so that they stay straight. And I'll just give you a closer look as to how my SSDs are mounted on this side. Now, I could have mounted one of them over here, but the SATA cables were being strained. The SATA power cables, I mean. Typically, when you have 2 drives here, one of them will be facing this way, and the connectors will go up top. So, there's 2 retention points over here. This, and there are 2 screw holes over here and here. Now, you only need to use one of these, because then you'll have retention from 3 points, and that's enough to keep the drive in place. What I don't like is the 3.5-inch bay. Now, this is a metallic rail which you slide into. There's no mounting bracket like you find in Corsair cases or Cooler Master cases. So since you have metal on metal, when these drives are being accessed heavily, you have a lot of noise. So that is not very pleasing. There are a lot of cutouts even behind the motherboards for cable routing, but even with horrible routing, as you've seen over here, it still looks fairly clean from the front, as long as you're using the appropriate cutouts to get your cables out. Like, for example, HD audio goes there, and the one of the USB 2 points. Sorry for the lighting. And over here you can see all the SATA cables. You can go through the different cutouts there. Well, I'm using top intake fans over here because the front fans are not very good. These are very horrible, and they're not good enough to actually pull in enough air from these cutouts. I'd highly recommend replacing them, but that would drive up the cost of the case, at which point you can just get a better case anyway. So, well, horrible things about the case, which I will show you in a minute. First of all, the HD audio cable, you will usually route it through here. If you're routing this before the power supply, which you would have to do because there's not enough space to squeeze anything through when you have the power supply installed. You'd want to lift the cable up whilst you're inserting the power supply, or else you'll create tension and you'll just get yanked out from the front. Now, I'm not getting my HD audio from the front because I may have damaged it. Basically, I pushed this in, it caused some tension, causing that HD audio cable, which you can't probably see because of the lighting, it caused this to just, pop out, and I've either damaged the cable or I've damaged the motherboard connector that way. So whatever you're routing through here, you want to lift it up a bit whilst you're inserting the power supply, so that it doesn't get yanked through when you're trying to insert it, because it can get a little bit finicky and a little bit difficult to insert that thing. So USB 3.0, all the headers can be routed through here. It's quite nicely done. Now the front I/O connectors are going through over here. I'm going to remove the front panel now. So the best way to do this is to use your thumb here and pull like so. And then I'm going to have to switch hands here, and then thumb here, fingers. On my case, the right side is much harder to remove, so I actually had to use both hands to remove that side. And I pretty much dropped the panel as well. So that's how I remove the front panel. So again, these fans are horrible. Now, if you haven't removed this cutout for the 5¼ inch bay over here, what you can do is, I believe there is a slot here to install another fan. But because there's no mesh, you'll probably accumulate more dust that way. This mesh is removable, but you'd have to unscrew the fans before cleaning this out. Now, you might be wondering why not have the mesh at the front. The reason is that this is a clear acrylic front panel. So if you have mesh in the front, after about a month or so, you're just going to see gray carpet in that area. Now you might be thinking, why not make a full mesh front? I've had the Spec 03 and the Cooler Master 130 Advanced before. Both of those have front meshes, and that turns into a carpet right after a month. And even after you clean it, there's still a gray residue left over. So you're gonna have to wash that out later on to get it like nice and have like that black finish on the mesh once again. So that can look pretty ugly. So aesthetically speaking, this is a better choice. So it won't look as bad as quickly when dust does accumulate. Now, in terms of build quality, the materials are really cheap. The finishing on this part is not very good, and the plastic on the base at the front over here is very flimsy, as I showed you earlier. So basically what happens is, if you try to lift it from this end, this flexes, which means if you do it often enough, you're going to end up cracking this portion. So if you want to lift the case up, you put your hand over here and lift. Do not lift by the front portion. The back portion is okay, that's still solid because it doesn't have this type of a cutout or this type of spacing. So, and the top part surprisingly is also okay. One thing you might be wondering, this is not removable. It seems removable, but it's not. So if you pull at it and you think it's breaking away, it's removable, no, you're just breaking the case. Do not remove this portion. If you want to install fans, basically slide it in and you do it the old-fashioned way. It's screwed up from the top, like just behind this magnetic filter, which is it's really cheap, but it's nice that they have a magnetic filter. So we just have it over here. It supports up to a 240mm rad, which mounts up top. It does not support front mounting, and I wouldn't recommend front mounting because due to the spacing and the way that the front panel is built, you're not going to get enough air through there. So it's better to have either a rear exhaust, if you can do that, or a 240mm up top. But frankly speaking, I'm just using air cooling on this thing. With the case on, with these fans not around, the temps are about 5 degrees higher. Like before I upgraded with the top intake, so this case does get pretty hot because you don't have enough cool air coming in. So that's one of the issues that I have with this case. The power and reset buttons work well enough. The power button's a little sensitive. A light tap will usually initiate a system power on, so there's that. And another thing is the front IOs. I'm really disappointed by this because there's a single USB 3.0 and a single USB 2.0. Each header basically, motherboard header basically goes out to 2 USB 2.0 and 2 USB 3.0. So it's kind of wasted if you only have one port when that particular header supports 2 ports. So I thought that was a bit of a wash, but beggars can be choosers. They didn't have any of the other cases that I wanted when I wanted to build my PC, so I got this because it was cheaper. Well, not because it's cheaper, but like, you know, I couldn't get what I wanted, and this has a nice power supply shot, which I'm really impressed that a case at this price point has one, because it's 69 Sing dollars. So basically, if you're in the States, it's probably a sandwich and a cup of coffee at Starbucks. So that's usually the way it works out. This would be, what, a $39 case in the States? I'm not sure how the shipping and taxation works there. But it's 69 Sing dollars here. And the Spec 03 is also around $69 now. So if you check out the Corsair Carbide price, and I think you might get a similar range. I'm impressed by everything that they've done so far. It's not the worst case to build in, and aesthetically speaking, once it's all together, it really doesn't look bad. It looks really clean. The only reason why my build is much messier than your typical build is because I'm using a lot of fans. I'm using all 6 SATA connections. I have a bunch of storage. It's all hooked up, so it's pretty difficult to get the cabling right because everything sort of hooks up in a weird way. Like, there's not enough space. So if you were typically buying a machine of this sort, you wouldn't be putting in the hardware that I'm putting in. Originally I was going to do this in a Fantex P400S. Even that doesn't have enough mount points for all the drives, but that would have been something that would have been that was easier to build in. So given what it is pretty easy to work with. There are enough cable tie down points on the case if you look at the other side, and you can see even with the horrible terrible cable management, it still looks sort of acceptable from the other side once everything's run up and running. As you can see, there are cable ties here, all the way down. There's also 2 over here, so there's more than enough if you're running a minimal setup, like 1 GPU, maybe only the 4 drives, and let's say just the case fans. And if you're running a radiator, maybe you have everything hooked up to the motherboard instead of, like, you know, having things routed through. So that way you'd have a much cleaner build. So I think that's about it. I will show you one more shot of the machine running with everything plugged in and sealed up for the final shot. And as I mentioned earlier, if you're going to be using all the drives like me, if you run out of SSD mount points, well, you can stuff them down here, or you can just like screw them in at the optical way, or the 5¼ inch bay drives. But it's basically use your hand to hold it firmly and just screw it in. 2 screws will just make it stay firm. You can try to like press it up against the front panel a bit so that multiple drives are flush together, so it looks a bit better. So yeah, the final part will be the completed system. So I've closed everything back up. So just see that. Sliding up. Press the power button. And there we this is what it looks like when it's booting up. And this is what it looks like with the case cover on. Please be warned that this smudges and scratches extremely easily along with the rest of the case. If you can see up close, there's already a scratch over here. So, I guess that's it for the video. Hope you enjoyed it. Please comment, like or dislike, and let me know your opinions on how I can improve in the future. Okay, one of the things that I don't like about this is the PCI Express brackets. They are basically the peel away type instead of ones that you can just unscrew and remove. So because of that, I've had to actually replace them with PCI brackets from my previous builds, and this is just taped over, and I'll tell you more about that. One of the major issues with this case is that the cutout for the PCI Express bracket for the last slot, it wasn't cut out right, so you can't really insert a card in there properly and have it stay in place. Basically what will happen is, instead of being straight up, it's going to be a bit crooked like that. So whilst the slot will fit in, it's just the bracket will be a little bit crooked, and there'll be a bit of pressure on that slot, which I didn't like, even though it was working perfectly. So I removed this. So that is one of the issues that I have with this case. That's actually a major problem, other than the cheap build quality of some of the materials.